Well, good evening. So here we are, chapter 2. What happened on the other side of the wall? Nicobotanus didn't stop to think. He just ran as fast as he could, across the lawn, down the path, round a hedge and into a little shed, and bolted the door. "Open up!" cried the man, and the hinges creaked and the door shook as he banged it with his fists. That door's not going to last long, thought Nicobotanus to himself. He dragged a large old stone roller up against it. "Open this door at once! You hear?" The man was shouting. But Nicobotanus didn't hear him. In fact, he didn't hear anything at all. He was too amazed by what he had found. "You have to come out eventually," the man was saying. "And the longer you leave it, the worse it'll be for you." But he could have saved his breath. Nicobotanus wasn't listening. He was on his knees examining what he had revealed when he moved the roller. He brushed off the dust and undid the catch, and then lifted it up. "Right! I'm going to break down this door," said the man. And then, because he knew he'd have to repair the door himself, he added, "Do you hear?" But Nicobotanus didn't hear. Nicobotanus wasn't there. He had disappeared through the trap door he had discovered, and was running down stone steps that were slippery with slime that smelled of graveyards, and went down and down, deeper and deeper into the ground, until it became pitch black. "Rosie," said Nicobotanus to himself, "this is all your fault." He heard his heart pounding, and he heard his steps echoing along the dank rock of the narrow passageway that went down and down, until all at once there was nothing, and before he realized he was falling in the blackness. He was. Picture. Falling. Several thoughts flashed through his mind at the same time, in the way that thoughts can. The first was something on the line of "bother," only a bit ruder. The second was a rather unkind thought about his best friend, who had instigated the whole expedition, and involved her dangling over a snake pit, while numerous fierce dragons flew at her, chanting, "How could you do it to him, poor Nicobotanus?" The third thought was, suppose it's a well, a deep, unused well, with slimy, slippery sides that you could never climb, and icy water at the bottom that... At this point, he discovered it was not a well. He had made this discovery very suddenly and very painfully. "Oof!" said Nicobotanus, and he lay there in the pitch blackness, with not a single breath left in his body, for what seemed like the whole winter, but was probably only a few seconds. He came to himself, in fact, just as a stone hit him on the head. "Oof!" said Nicobotanus again, and then realized he could hear footsteps high above him. "Stop, sir!" he called out, but the footsteps kept on coming down. "Aha! I've got you now," said a voice, alarmingly high above him. "Oh, no, sir! You don't understand, sir," said Nicobotanus. "You mustn't come any further. There's a—" "I've got you!" cried the man, "and I shall beat every bone in your body until it's black and—" Nicobotanus supposed the man was going to say blue, but in fact, the next word he uttered sounded more like It was not a word with which Nicobotanus was all familiar, but he understood its meaning perfectly, and moved smartly out of the way. Crash! "Are you all right?" he asked. There was a silence. Nicobotanus felt his way back in the pitch dark, until his hand touched the man's leather jerkin. The man was lying still as death, but he was breathing. "I must get help," said Nicobotanus to himself, and he began groping around in the blackness to find another way out. When he found it, however, his heart sank. The only exit appeared to be a narrow gap down by the floor, no more than a foot high. "I can't squirm through that in the pitch dark," he said to himself, but at that very moment he heard Rosie's cheerful voice behind him saying, "You can do it." Nicobombus span around, and there, to his immense surprise, was nothing. Just blackness. No Rosie. No anybody. "But I don't know if it leads anywhere," he said to the voice in his head. "And it's such a tight squeeze. I might get stuck." He didn't hear Rosie's voice again, but he knew what it would have said. And that was how he found himself wriggling down a narrow passage of stone in the pitch black. There's some serious wriggling going on. Just saying. He squirmed and he wriggled there in the black for a long, long time, and the tunnel didn't get any wider. It got narrower until he could hardly inch along it. "I'm going back," he said to himself, but he didn't. He just kept wriggling and squirming, until suddenly he found he could stand up. He took a pace forward and immediately fell over some steps leading up. "Ow!" he said, although what he really meant was, "Thank goodness!" He began to climb, and he was still climbing some minutes later, round and round, up and up. It must be a tower, he thought, or the grandest house in Venice. But at that very moment he saw a crack of light in front of him. He stretched out his hand and found himself touching a catch that clicked softly in the dark. A panel suddenly slid open, and Nicobotanus stepped through into the most amazing room he'd ever seen. And that's chapter 2. Love you both.